I'm asking you to resign. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes. One of the questions that this whole tragedy raises is about America's energy policy. And it's time, I think, for Congress to call the question, does America's energy policy work? Is America's current energy policy sustainable? The United States, as you know, consumes 25% of the world's oil. We have 2% of the proven reserves. Americans, our businesses and our consumers spent nearly $900 billion last year, most of that going to countries that are not our friends. And the current policy that we have works well for some, including the shareholders of the companies represented here today. What you do very well. Run very efficient operations with some tragic exceptions. But profits increased among your 5 companies from $28 billion in 2002 to $64 billion in 2009. And that's after your companies paid dividends that shareholders appreciated of $37 billion. In Exxon, I believe Mr. Tillerson only has repurchased stock in the value of almost $20 billion. But the question for Congress, and I'm going to ask you to comment on this, is whether we're at a point where taxpayers are being well served when taxpayers are continuing to provide subsidies for business as usual energy policy that's based on a carbon energy 19th century approach versus a clean and renewable energy fuel policy of the 21st century that we need. And the question really is, should taxpayers in the United States continue to provide billions of dollars of subsidies to an industry, the oil industry, that's mature, to an oil industry that's extremely profitable, into an industry that's based on a carbon-based fuel? Or is it time, finally, for the taxpayer incentives that are being steered to the oil industry to be redirected to efforts to develop a 21st century clean energy economy? Mr. Tillerson, my understanding just on a specific tax provision is that Section 199 of the domestic manufacturing deduction provides a tax rate reduction for oil and gas companies. Repealing that would shift $17.3 billion from oil companies, and it could be redirected to clean energy efforts, which your company engages in to some extent. Would you support the repeal and redirection of that?
No, Congressman, I would not. The Section 199 tax was put in place to preserve and protect manufacturing jobs in the United States.
All right.
I'm not sure how to explain to a refinery worker why his job isn't any more or less important than an automotive worker's job.
This is not about whose job is important. The jobs that are important are the folks that are down there in the Gulf Coast and are losing their jobs because of this catastrophe that just happened. This is about whether taxpayer subsidies are going to help Americans get jobs in an energy policy for the future. Mr. Watson of Chevron, I'll ask you. My understanding is the tax code right now provides oil and gas companies to expense intangible drilling costs. That costs taxpayers $7.8 billion over 10 years. Do you support continuing that, or would you support repealing it or redirecting it to clean energy efforts?
I support continuing it, and I don't consider it a subsidy. I consider it similar to many other provisions in the tax code that dictate the timing of the deduction.
Well, you know, I have one question. I believe in tax incentives, but I question whether they should go to mature industries and industries that are profitable. They've managed to get their sea legs, and your industry enjoyed profits of $68 billion, hard work of a lot of people. But do we need in America to be starting to use taxpayer money, which is what these subsidies are, to help us move to a clean energy economy that's sustainable and does not have the risk of these catastrophes that are causing people their lives and their livelihoods? Mr. Marvin, you have a view on this?
I do. And I think if I go back to where you started, I think it is time for Congress to take a comprehensive review of energy supply to this country. I think part of that would be then, in addition to all the alternatives and renewables that I talked about in my opening statement, I think it would recognize the importance of
All right.
oil and gas.
And Mr.
How we make that
Okay,
happen.
thank you. My last question. Mr. McKay, there was a report by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Donahue, who said last week that he believed that the taxpayer should help BP pay for the cost of this spill. BP official testimony is you're going to bear the burden on this. Do you repudiate the suggestion by the United States Chamber of Commerce that the taxpayer participate in the cost of this cleanup?
We're going to pay for all costs of the cleanup.
Thank you.